So in OOPS, we will start with why they have introduced object-oriented programming concepts. What is class and object? How to initialize the object? What is constructor? And what are the default and parameterized constructor? And then this keyword. So we'll try to complete this in today's session, right? So before I tell you what is OOPS, any thought on this from anyone? What is OOPS and why it was actually introduced by a programmer? Because earlier we used to have the procedure-oriented programming language, right? C, Fortran, and Pascal. Those were procedure-oriented programming language. So why they started with object-oriented programming language? Any thought on this? Why they have started with object-oriented? What was the drawbacks of procedure-oriented? So they thought that they should introduce something called object-oriented. No. So what happens, guys? In procedure-oriented programming language, let's say I have a main task, and that task need to be finished, right? So let's say I have a main task, and that task needs to be completed by programmer. So what programmer used to do, they divide the task into multiple subtasks. Task, subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3, like this. And then for each subtask, they used to write a procedure, right? Procedure as in a function, or whatever we call called method in Java. So they used to divide the main task into multiple subtasks, and then for each subtask, they used to write the functions or procedures. So that is why they call it as procedure-oriented programming language, because all the tasks are completed by using by creating multiple functions, right? Now what happened with that approach? Let's say you have multiple subtasks to complete. Let's say more than 100 subtasks to complete, and then once the code size reaches more than 10,000 line of code or 50,000 line of code, then in some point of time, what programmer used to feel is like they are losing the control in the code, and they are not able to track what function they have created for what task, right? So it was like it was going beyond their control. And for creating a program for larger complex applications like launching of satellite, etc., I mean, this was becoming a cumbersome task for them to track the code and to maintain the code also, because maintenance was really challenging there because of the size of the code. So what they thought, instead of doing this using multiple functions, they will divide the main task into multiple classes, right? So for each subtask they will have classes altogether, that would be different classes. And let me write main task here, main task or main method here, right? And here I am having class 1, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, and in each class we have data as well as method, data member and member function. Data method for class 1, data method for class 2, data method for class 3, and data method for class 4, right? So earlier approach was to create functions for each subtask, but here in the object oriented programming, they are creating a class for achieving for completing that task. And likewise they are having multiple classes. So for, let's say, for a larger complex application, they are having hundreds of classes. So with that the challenges which they were facing in the procedure oriented programming language were not there. because they were not losing the control because of the size of the code. The code were divided into multiple classes, and with that approach, the maintenance was also easy. So that is the reason they started with object-oriented programming approach with C++ and followed by Java, right? So that is the reason they started with the object-oriented programming. Now it's all about object only, right? So everything is about object only. This is the single entity which they play in the object-oriented programming. So now the question is, what is object actually? What is the object actually in programming terms? We discussed about this, right, earlier when we talked about introduction, guys. Isha, Sitara, what is the object? I can't hear you if you're speaking something. All right, so object is basically anything which exists physically in this real world, right? So which exists physically in this real world. It could be a my laptop, right, on which I am working. It could be a table. It could be a chair. It could be bat, ball, or it could be any human. It could be any animal, right? So these are all objects, okay, which exist physically in this world. Making sense?
Yes.
Okay, and each object is having some property, and each object can perform some action, right? So the property and the action would vary from object to object. Let's say laptop is a kind of object which is having some length, width, weight, right? And we can uh, do a lot of tasks with the laptop, right? Similarly, the chair is used to have something on it, right? So each object is having some property and some action. So these properties actually are called variables. Those are variables, and these actions actually are called methods, right? So if we talk about humans, right, human or any person, or maybe any person, let's take the name of Nitin, right? So Nitin is having some property, as in Nitin is having name, Nitin is having age, Nitin is having gender, right? So these are the property of Nitin. And on if you talk about actions, Nitin can walk, Nitin can talk, Nitin can read, Nitin can slip, right? So these are the actions which Nitin can perform, right? So if you think about any object which that will have have couple of properties, and that will have couple of actions which are associated with that object, right? You could think of an animal, right? So a dog has 4 legs, dog is black, dog has dog has 2 eyes or something like that. So dog has some age, right? So that will be dog properties of dog. And if you talk about what dog what action dog can perform, as in dog can walk, dog can sleep, dog can walk, right? So those are the actions which dog can do, right? So this is something property of a object, and this is something the action object can perform, right? On the same note, we can have other objects also who are possessing the same property and who can perform the same action, right? So I have, let's say, Naresh also having the same property. Let's say Disha also having the same property, and Disha can also perform the same actions. Let's say Sitara. So Sitara or any Sita or Geeta or anyone, right? So they are having the same properties, and they can perform the same actions. So combinedly they create a class, right? So this is actually, this actually will become class, as in person class or human class, right? So person class will have all the humans, as in Nitin, Naresh, Disha, Sitara, Sita, Geeta, and all possesses same property and they can perform almost same actions, right? So this is how we define the classes, right? And this is how we define the objects. Now when we say what is actually a class, so class is actually is a blueprint. Class is a blueprint, or it is a as in it is a model which can hold multiple similar type of objects, right? And class does not exist physically. Object does exist physically. Making sense? What is class? What is object?
Yes, Nitin.
Yes, Nitin.
So class is a blueprint or it is a model which can hold multiple similar type of objects, right? So here we talked about person class. Uh, we can talk about animal class also. We can talk about sport class also, which will have different sizes of beds, and those beds will have similar properties. So likewise we can have objects and classes, right? Now if you think of another example, let's say I am going to stitch a you know a shirt for, let's say, for me, right? So for that, what I will do, I will create a blueprint of that shirt, right, in a paper, that what should be the size of shirt, what should be the length of sleeves, what should be the design of shirt, etc. That I will print on a, I mean, I will design that on a paper. So that blueprint is actually a class, and that uh, uh, you know blueprint will have some property, as in the shirt will have some properties, and shirt will have some action item associated with that, action methods associated with that. So those will become the property and the methods of that object, right? And whatever the cloth we are using for stitching that shirt, right? So that will be the memory allotted to shirt, as in whatever the memory we are allotting once we are creating the object, right? So that will be a kind of memory we are allotting when we are creating the object. So you can think of any such example wherein you can actually uh, really map with the real world examples. So what is object, how what all properties object will have, what all methods object will have, and how it is mapped with the real world example. Now let's say I am having a person class. So let me create one class, person class. Person is already exist. Okay, so let me create person one. Okay, and here in this class uh, it has some property, as in it has some string name, then int age, then char gender, right? And it has some method, public void talk, public void walk. Only two are enough. So this is a class, right? See, so can talk. See, so can walk. Okay. So this is a class. Now, since these properties and methods are actually associated with each person, then we have to create the object of this class. So that I will do in another class, right? So I'll create another class. Let's say a person as in demo 3. Okay, and in that I will have a method, public static void main method. And how do I create the object of person class?
By instantiating, creating the person p equals to new person.
Person p equal to, or let's take some real name. Let's say I take Nitin. Person Nitin equal to
New person one.
New person one.
New person one.
Yeah. Okay. New person one. Okay, so I am creating the object of class, right? And with that object, I can actually access Nitin dot age, Nitin dot. Okay, let's talk about that later. Now, what happens in memory, guys? When you create the object of the class, so let's say I have there are two types of memory. First is called heap memory, and second is called method area. Okay. So whatever the properties you are having for a class, those will be stored in heap memory. So let's say name of a person, or age, or gender. So whatever the property you will have for a object, that will be stored in a heap memory, and whatever the method you are declaring, that will be stored in method area. Right? So we are talking about the instance variable and instance method. I mean about the non-static method. So talk and then walk, right? And here is the object. So object as in Nitin, right? So once the object is created, then it will have these all properties and these all methods, right? And this is something which is having some address in the memory, right? So I have created a object of person one class, and this is the new object of person one class, and this is the object reference. So it will have some address in that that we called as hash code, right? So when I try to check what is the address of this hash this object reference, I can get that by using hash code method of object class. So when I check that, I will get some hexadecimal number here. So this is the address I am getting, right? So this is the address in memory which Nitin is having in memory. So I can write like this here. Okay. So this is the address of Nitin. Similarly, if I am creating another object here, that will have another hash code. So let's say tomorrow I am creating another object here, person one equal to Naresh equal to new person one. And then if I'm checking what is the address of Naresh in memory, so I will have to do Naresh dot hash code. So I'll get another address from memory. So this is where Naresh is having. Okay, but both of them will be actually given the separate copy of these two. Right. So here I am having Naresh also, and Naresh, and this is also having the address, whatever the address we got from this hash code, right? So that is the address of this object reference. Okay, so Nitin can access all these variables. Nitin can access all these, methods. Naresh can access all these variables, and Naresh can also access all these methods. Okay, so separate copy of name is gender is given to Nitin, and talk and walk to Nitin, and separate copy of name age gender is given to Naresh, and talk and walk to Naresh. And likewise we can create multiple objects, and each object will have separate copy of these variables and these methods. Yeah, is it making sense until here?
Yeah, understood.
Okay, now next question is how do you actually initialize them? So we have talked about what is actually what is object, and now next is how to initialize the object. Why we need to require the initialization? Let's say I am having one method here called public void talk, and in that I am doing, I am saying that what is my name, what is my age, and what is my gender. So let's say my name is plus name, my age is, let's say, plus age, and my gender is, let's say, plus gender. Okay, now let me remove this method. So I am having 3 instance variable, and I am having one non-static method, and I am creating object of Nitin, and then what I am saying, please introduce yourself, or let me know what is your name, what is your age, what is your gender. So I am directly calling this method Nitin.talk from here, and I am just trying to check what we have here. So initially what we are getting name as null, right, and age as 0, and gender as space, right? So these are the default values. If you do not initialize any object, then these are the default values which will be assigned to the object, to the variables by JVM, right? So for any integer short int byte, 0 will be assigned, and for string null will be assigned. So for any int short byte long, 0 will be assigned. By default 0 will be assigned. For any string, then null will be assigned. For any character, space will be assigned. Okay, so these are the default values which are actually assigned at the time of creating object and without initializing them. For boolean, false will be assigned if we have any boolean. Okay, now we have to initialize the object. Now there are multiple ways of initializing the object. First way is we can directly initialize from here. I can write here directly, let's say my name is Nitin, and I am 30-year-old, and my gender is male. And now if I call that method from here, I get the proper output. Okay, so this is the first way of initializing an object, right? The second way could be, I can do it from the main method also. So how I will do that? I will create Nitin. I'm creating a Nitin only. So let me write it P1 here. P1. Let's say P1 dot name, and here what I'm giving, let's say Naresh. P1 dot age, let's say here I'm giving 28. P1 dot gender, let's say here I'm giving male only. Okay, so I can do it from here also, and when I call the P1 dot talk method, now what it will print? Will it print these values which I initialized at the time of declaring the variables? So will it print these values?
First main method will execute, so it should print the values given into the main method.
Okay, that's correct. Yeah, so since we have the values here, but those values will be overwritten by these values. Okay, so we will get these only. Once we execute this, we will get these values only. Those values will be overwritten. Okay, so this is the another way of initializing the object. But the problem with this approach is there is no data security here, right? We have defined something, we have initialized something here, but those values are overwritten by whoever is writing, whoever is declaring the object, and then overwriting this. Let's say I have some sensitive data here. Let's say the salary of a person, right? So salary is somewhat sensitive data, and that can easily be modified by another person who is writing this class, right? So for that, what we can do, we can declare them as private access specifier, right? So no one else can modify that. So if I write here private, so you are aware, right? Private can be accessed only within the class. It cannot be accessed outside of the class. If I write here private, all will become private, and then it will give you the error here. So person name, person one name is not visible. Person one dot age is not visible. Person one dot gender is not visible. So with this, you will not be able to modify the values here, right? So I will have to comment this, and then if I run this program, I'll get the expected output here, right? So using private also, you will have to restrict the access of these variables. So usually for variables we use private, and usually for methods we use public, right? So this is the usual practice we follow, right? Now until here it is fine. I am having only one object and I am getting the right output. Let's say tomorrow I am having another variable, another object, person p2 equal to new person, and if with
That is P2 and person 1. Yeah, reference, the first one.
yeah, oh, okay.
No, not that one.
Yeah, okay. Person one, yeah.
Person one, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let's say tomorrow I am having another object called P2, and with that also I am saying please introduce yourself. So I will again call this method, and then what I will get as output? I will get same output. I will get Nitin 30 male, Nitin 30 male, right? So how to differentiate these two objects? For that we have constructor, right? So instead of declaring, initializing the object at the beginning, what we can do, we can create the constructor. So I am having 3 variables here, and I will have some constructor here, person 1. Okay, and which will help you to initialize your objects. So